After today, you're going to know how to use whole half diminished in the context of the blues to get that 20s, 30s jazz sound in your line. And then the modern sound of half whole diminished too. Let's dig in. Before we start learning specific patterns in diminished and how to put it on the fretboard, let's start conceptually with the diminished 7 sound itself. In jazz, it's a pretty rare thing. You don't see a lot of diminished chords, meaning diminished that's relating to a diminished root, to where the chord structure, the interval pattern is 1, flat 3, flat 5, double flat 7. Typically in jazz, if I hear a diminished chord, it will be attached to a root that will just use the diminished as an upper structure, but really that F diminished on that G root is just a G7 flat 9, meaning I'm using the diminished sound as an upper structure, typically to guide the sound up a fourth, meaning that G7 likes to go to that C. So I'm just using the diminished structure on a root to create an interval pattern that's going to pull me in a cadence-like fashion. That is not what we're talking about now. Now I'm talking about a for real diminished. Now if I have G7 going to G diminished, that's a sort of suspension. Think about the G7 sound as being home. It's a weird kind of home. It's a bluesy home. It's a little crooked. It's not like your major 7 chord. It's this. Now, when I turn that into a G diminished, the home gets all fucked up, right? I have this, which is a little bit fucked up to begin with, like a little bit dysfunctional home, right? But then Daddy had a few, right? And now he's back. So when you went to that suspension, it felt really off, really weird, but then you made it okay again. That's the basic use of a diminished. So let's put that in context. In a blues, I typically have a 1, 6, 2, 5 as the final turnaround in the last 2 bars, right? 1, 6, 2, 5, and now I'm going to resolve into the suspension, into the chord. You know this sound. So I went suspension with the diminished into the resolution. G diminished, G7. Notice that every chord tone other than the root is just going down a half step. The third is down a half step to the flatted third. The fifth is down a half step to the flatted fifth. The flatted 7 is down a half step to the double flatted 7. Together it creates this sound. Okay, so the scale that fits a diminished chord is whole half diminished. Now, if I just think about G diminished, right? It has 4 inversions. Here's the root position, first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. The diminished scale is just approaching all those sounds with another diminished chord that's a half step underneath each. Hear that? Now, it's that scale that I'm going to be using on the 1 chord in the blues, meaning 1 whole half diminished to suspend the sound. So if the sound of that 1 chord is pentatonic, major pentatonic, minor pentatonic, mixolydian, I can create this suspension before I resolve using that whole half diminished. So let's do a 2, 5, 1 in G. 2. I'm just going to resolve to dominant, like a bluesy 2, 5, 1. Now, second time, I'm going to use that diminished suspension. So from D7 to G diminished. So I went G diminished, F sharp diminished, and then the same pattern down a minor third, E diminished, D sharp diminished, and then resolved to G7. Now, when you listen to gypsy jazz and old jazz, they typically do that to be bluesy. There's something very inherently bluesy about that scale. You can just check it out melodically. All I'm thinking about now is whole half on the top string. Right? That's root, 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 6, 6, and then I have like that 7 going back to 1, right? So it gives me all these colors, these 8 sounds. That's using drop 2s. Now that voicing for drop 2 is super easy to manipulate, so I can just be bluesy with that. Let's imagine that I'm just vamping on G, right? Just to create a little bit chordal texture. So here's like just playing around with that melody that's going root, 7, root, but with that diminished sound. Here's flat 3, 2, flat 3. That's bluesier because it has that major pentatonic. That blue note of the major pentatonic is right there. Right? That's like sharp 2, 2, root, but you can thicken that up with chords. Here's that minor pentatonic edge. Right? Melodically, I'm just thinking about that blue note of the minor pentatonic, the flat 5 and the 4. That sounds like a Django Reinhardt head. Right? Right? That's all in the one chord. I'm not really, it may sound like I'm moving in some sort of cadential pattern, but it's not a cadence. That's a cool sound. Now here's the harshest one, right? The 6 and the flat 6. Right? But it's still not bad, especially when you move up to that 6. The way that I'm thinking about these diminished pairs of chords is melodic, so I'm really paying attention to the melody note. The 7 really likes to move to the 1 and then resolve, or go. So I'm going diminished, diminished, then resolving to a normal G7. Like if the root is on top, then the 7th is on top, that F sharp, resolving that. Here, both sound pretty great. I really like that sound. It's inherently bluesy of resolving that flat 5 to the 4 and then resolving to the G. Listen to that blues line. If I go, how bluesy is that, right? It sounds like major pentatonic. Now you can experiment with that on the inner 4 strings using drop 2s as well. All you got to do is find the root with your pinky on the melody note. So where's a G? Here's, right? That's the same as this, using these voicings. Here's that 6. That's flat 6, double flatted 7. Here I have that bluesy thing with the flat 3 and the 2. Here's that flat 5. That's the West Montgomery type line. Pretty cool sound. You can also do it on the lower strings. Again, try to just memorize that one voicing that you're moving around, but zone in on the melody note. It's really good to remember that your pinky plays it when you're doing drop 2s on the top 4 strings. Pinky plays the melody note on the bottom 4 strings, and then it's ring finger when you use that same voicing in the bottom. So here's your flat 3, 2. Right, here's the voicing. Here's that flat 5, 4. right? I really like using it with these fingers. I think there's no option. Here's that 6. And finally, here's that root 7 root. So it's a pretty useful thing. Now, again, throwing it in a blues just means locating in a 12-bar blues when you arrive at the 1 chord and kind of like saying, hey, wait a minute, here I come. So a 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, another thing you want to keep in mind is that what you are doing when you're playing 1 whole half diminished is modally exactly the same as playing half whole diminished on the 4 chord. So all of these chords that we just talked about, put on a C root, give you a C symmetric diminished half whole sound. So you can also use them in place of the 4 chord in the blues form. So if I just want to use them instead of a suspension as a plagal cadence, all I got to do is use those sounds on measure 2, measure 5 and 6, and measure, what is it, 10? 10 of the blues where the 4 chord appears. So it's like 1, here's that 4 chord. So all these chords with C in the bass give you half whole diminished now. So in the harmonic rhythm, it matters where you're applying the scale, because if you're applying it on the territory of the 1 chord, then you're really just playing that whole half suspension sound. But the moment that it's on that C root, it's a plagal cadence. Plagal cadence meaning 4 back to 1. So if this is the bass motion, check out the difference in sound. Here it is on the territory of the 1 chord. A 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a different sound. Here's on the 4 chord. Right? You are using all these diminished chords to transport you back to the 1 chord, but it's not that typical suspension sound. Now let's address the elephant in the room, which is how shittily most of you have put together the diminished scale on the fretboard. I know some of you are actually watching this like, I didn't even put it on the fretboard. You guys are losers. Losers. What's wrong with you? It's right there. It's called half whole, whole half. Just try it on 1 string. Half whole, half, right? So yeah, no excuse. You just got to try it on the fretboard. But for those of you who have tried and turned on Monkey Brain, this is more directed at you. We learn these across patterns and then we get trapped in the symmetry, in just the shape nature of the scale, right? These kind of things. And then we know how to move those in minor thirds. I totally went hard on the blues, Dad. I'm sorry, but there's a reason your wife left you. Now, okay. Anyways, back to the point. So let's talk about how to break away from that pattern. Those of you who have put together diminished quasi-successfully probably have noticed that there are these dominant chords that are hiding minor thirds apart, meaning if I have this G7 thing, right? And I'm trying to think now, half whole diminished. Now, why half whole? We were talking about whole half. Whole half gives you the suspension sound. Half whole turns the chord from a tonic sound. Now remember, inside the blues, 1 dominant is dominant home. It's a stable sound, right? everything pulls to it. But the moment that I put half whole diminished on it, it is no longer that. Now it's a dominant chord like any other dominant chord in Western music that is pulling, right? It is a dominant function, meaning that dominant chord in the context of the blues on measure 1 and measure 3 really feels like home. But measure 4, it starts pulling me towards that 4 chord. It becomes something a little bit different. And when I apply half whole diminished, that's what turns it into that thing. It wants to go to that C chord. If I explore that scale, the thing that I'm going to find out is that there are these dominant chords in minor thirds, meaning G7 is there, but also B flat 7, also D flat 7, and also E7. Now, monkey brain is going to want to make you do this. Oh, I see this scale pattern here, and I see it here, and then here on that E, right? And then explore the neck that way. It's not like there's no value in that. That's good for moving patterns. The problem is that it scrambles your sense of what's a chord tone and what's a tension, especially because you're basically building chords from tensions, meaning that B flat 7 you're visualizing is built from the sharp 9 of G. That D flat you're visualizing is built from the sharp 4 of G. And that E you're visualizing is built from the 6 of G. To make things a little bit more palatable with voice leading, you don't want to do that. What do you want to do instead? Build upper extensions from the chord tones like you do with any other substitution. Meaning if I'm just playing some kind of G in jazz that's moving to C, a typical thing to do is build a chord off its 3rd, or off its 5th, or off its flatted 7. Right? That's how we typically do it. So if we do that with diminished, the question is, what do we get? And here's the genius shit coming. You feel it? So from the root, we just get a dominant. But from the 3rd, we get this diminished major 7. Now let's look at that diminished major 7. I see a B flat triad with a B root. Now, that is that B flat chord that I was trying to get before, but I'm just putting it on that chord tone in the bass, right? It has the 3rd of G in the bass. Now, what do I get off the 5th? Exactly the same shit. D with a D flat triad, right? It's the triad that's off the sharp 4, but with the chord tone of G in the bass. And what do I get off the flat 7? Exactly the same shit, right? That is F in the bass, but E is the upper triad. So I'm still getting these kinds of substitutions, but I'm not making dominant chords of them. I'm just making, I'm taking just the triads and putting them on the chord tones of the dominant chord that I'm using, right? So when I want to move towards that C, I can get there with a B diminished major 7, with a D diminished major 7, right? This sound going here, it's just a C7 or here, right? Or this one, that's off the flat 7 of G, going there. Let's hear some of that in context. A 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh yeah. Now I'm really thinking about this as just visualizing the bass notes as they relate to G, almost in caged kind of fashion, right? So in this G caged, I'm looking root, okay, I have a dominant, off the 3rd, diminished major 7, off the 5th, diminished major 7. You gotta learn these voicings, right? So it's just, you just gotta learn that root position diminished major 7 to use. So this is pretty easy. This is pretty easy too. Flat 7 of G, right? Here's the root of G. I'm just using a dominant, the 3rd, and then the 5th. Let's see it on the bass strings. This might be a shape you're not accustomed to, but here it is off the 3rd of G, right? I'm seeing this triad. It's like a B flat bar chord basically on a root that's a half step too high for it, right? That's all you got to do. If you go to your caged forms, right? A shape, just fuck with the root, right? D shape, move the root. E shape, move the root. That's all I'm trying to tell you, okay? But you gotta calibrate the bass notes to be in the harmony. Where can I use it? Well, in the blues, whenever I'm turning that G into a dominant G, meaning measure 4 when it's leading to the 4 chord, that's how you use it on the 1 chord. You can use it all the time on the 4 chord, and you can use it all the time on the 5 chord. So let's make a map of what that looks like. So a 1, 2, 3, 4. Off the third of the 4 chord. That's the Joe Pass chord. Right? He uses that all the time. That's C. If I'm doing that diminished major 7th thing off its third, here it is, going to the 1. Off the flat 7 of the 1 chord, back to the 4. The 5th of the 4 chord, to the 1 chord. Right? Now, let's say it's just a 1, 4, 5. Here's the 5 chord. That's that Miles Davis, right? Like all blues turnaround. That's a diminished major 7 off the 3rd of D. Diminished major 7 off the root of E flat, which is what they use in that tune. Forget about that for now. Just 5 chord, right? 4 chord, 1 chord, 5 chord again, off the 3rd, right? So let's make a map of it in a few areas. So a 1, 2, 3, 4. You dig? Pretty cool shit. Leave a comment below for a chance to win a free month on our Patreon, which is the best Patreon in the history of Patreons. I am 100% certain of it. There are so many tabs, lessons, great interaction. There's a Discord. There's so many things. Group lessons. You're gonna love it. Also, leave a comment below, sign up to all the things, like the thing, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.